Authors Press.
Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. And on the line with us today, we have Ron Talipitri. We'll be discussing his fantastic book, Great Adventurers of the 20th Century, 2nd edition. Of course, you see that it says 2nd edition there, so make sure when you're heading on over to authorspress.com, you're making sure that you get the most current and up-to-date edition, because this has been republished, so you want to get the most current one available. So once again, that's Great Adventures of the 20th Century, 2nd edition. And I will say, if you haven't figured it out already, Ron was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best movers in the business, Authors Press Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, do yourself a favor and contact Authors Press. And you can find out more information on them at authorspress.com. Ron, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you so much for being a guest. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. Listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have you as a guest with us today. And as I stated before, the education that we're going to receive is truly amazing. And I know we have so much information to cover, Ron, but before we go into the book, let's hold off slightly. Start by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself and your background, please.
I was a math teacher for over 20 years. And that gave me the skills I needed for detailed research. And I've also done a lot of minor adventures of my own. I've been skydiving. I've been whitewater rafting. I've climbed mountains, including the 5 highest in the lower 48. And I've been snorkeling and other things as well.
Ron, I'm curious. So the book itself, now it's categorized as the Great Adventures of the 20th Century. Are we following other adventurers on their particular journeys, or are we basically getting an in-depth view of your travels?
No, my travels have nothing to do with the book. Well, it's mentioned in the introduction briefly, but there are 19 great adventurers whose adventures were in the 20th century, and they are not motorized. None of them include motors. The moonwalk, for instance, is not one of them. But 3 of them would be well known. Edmund Hillary, when he climbed Mount Everest, that's a famous story. It's one that I was aware of when I was in high school, and one of the first ones that I knew about. Another one that I knew of when I was in high school was Thor Heyerdahl, who sailed across the Pacific Ocean on a raft. It's amazing. His story is also amazing, and I knew that when I was in high school.
Absolutely.
Also.
Now, I feel it's safe to assume this, but you know what happens when you assume, Ron, so I'm not going to do that. So yeah, I have you here on the line. I can just come right out and ask. Given your background and your own experience with your journeys and adventures that you've taken, what inspired you to comprise this book and put it out for the public to partake in as well?
Well, the knowledge of those 2 adventures from high school, they challenged my thinking throughout high school, and they made me want to have adventures of my own. And I realized when I was writing for another company that young boys need adventure. They need to read about adventures, and they eventually should go and have their own. And so I started thinking about other people like Perry and Amundsen, the first two men to visit the North Pole and the South Pole, respectively, and thought, those are great adventurers. And so I slowly compiled a list of 19 adventurers, and all 19 are in the book.
You know, I want to touch up on something that you said, Ron. You were talking about how you felt people should go on adventures, right? People should embark upon these journeys. Why do you feel that is important to experience?
Well, there's lots of kinds of adventures. I suppose team sports and other things are some ways that young boys get their adventures. But for me, I was not an athlete, so that was not an option. But I became at least a minor athlete through adventures. I backpacked a lot and climbed mountains and other things like that, and it shaped me.
Again, here on the line with Ron Talipitri, we're discussing his incredible book, Great Adventurers of the 20th Century, 2nd edition, available for purchase through authorspress.com. You know, Ron, we've waited long enough. My listening audience is going to get very upset with me if I don't ask this next question. Now, let's go a little bit more in depth with the book itself. We've covered inspiration. We've covered your background in depth. Talk to us about some of the journeys that you discovered during your research. Now, you highlighted that there were 3 out of the 19 that the general public would be fairly aware of. Or fairly knowledgeable in. Well, talk to us about some of the other ones that you discovered that the everyday person probably never even heard of.
John Wilcox explored Mammoth Cave and made the connection between 2 caves that were considered separate caves, and he found the connection. He led the overnight spelunking trip that found the connection, and it's an amazing story. Another amazing story is Norbert Castoret, who was the first person to dive into a cave, and he dove through what's called a sump, a water-filled thing, and he was just a kid. He didn't know whether there would be air to breathe or no air. He didn't know if he would die or not, and he did it. So that is an amazing story also, I think. The only woman in the book is Robin Davidson, who took her camel across the Australian outback. She was the first person to ever do that. And
I'm sorry, Ron, did you say she took
her...
her...
an amazing story.
Did you say she took her camel?
Yeah, she had a couple camels, actually, and she went across the Australian outback on a camel.
That is incredible. That is incredible. Ron, you know what I love so much about what you've done here is, as you started off the interview by saying, all of these adventurers did not use any type of motorized vehicle, right? Everything that they've done, they've either used, in this instance, a camel or other animals, or their own 2 feet, which of course just raises the stakes. It heightens the severity of their adventure itself. I absolutely love that. Now, why did you specifically choose to focus just on those adventurers and not other adventurers that had used, rockets or cars or the other motorized vehicle?
Well, partly because the motorization makes it easier
Mm-hmm.
For instance, the first plane flight, one could consider that an adventure, even a great adventure, but it's not the kind of adventure that's easy to replicate. And it's also not the kind that I was interested in. I was interested in outdoors, not cars or planes or things. There are some sky adventures, but they're in non-motorized things such as hot air balloons. And there's also an underwater adventure with the bathyscaphe, which has no motor either. It's not connected to the surface, but it drops down through the water and it rises back up as you dump ballast. And and the guy took one of those down to the bottom of the Mariana Trench.
Wow.
That's what I think. Wow.
Oh my goodness.
These are all great adventures.
Absolutely. Ron, would it be fair or safe to say that based upon your own individual adventures that you've taken, that all of these adventurers held a particular fondness in your heart because your journeys that you've taken were outside of motorized vehicles as well, right? I mean, you said that you traveled and you climbed mountains. There was no motorized vehicles that you were using either, correct?
Right, that's right. I have not dog sledded, but I have done most of the kinds of things that various of the adventurers have done.
Fantastic. Ron, as we start to tie down and close out of this fantastic book, because guys, listen, as if this wasn't amazing enough, there are 5 other books that he has also written. I mean, really, if we go down far enough in that rabbit hole, there's a lot more than 5, but 5 other books that we're going to quickly at least touch up on and make note of. But as we tie out of this fantastic interview, I'm curious, Ron, what would you say was a highlight for you in writing the book? Or if not a highlight, maybe something that surprised you that you weren't expecting prior to embarking upon the journey?
There are probably more climbers in the book than any other single thing. And some of the climbers, like Reinhold Messner, he climbed the 14 highest peaks in the whole world. He was the first ever to do so, but he did them all without oxygen masks, and he did them all solo. It would be a feat just to have climbed them all. But he was the first to do them solo and without oxygen. He was told he was nuts to even think about trying that on the first one when he first did Mount Everest. But he did it. He did it. He's an incredible climber.
This is absolutely astonishing. We know human beings are so dynamic, right? We're the feats that we are able to accomplish when we truly put our minds to something is absolutely incredible. And now we have a book filled with so many of them that have been documented throughout history. So guys, you know what you have to do. AuthorsPress.com are the places you have to go. The Great Adventurers of the 20th Century, 2nd edition, is the title you have to pick up. And Ron Talipitri is the author you have to thank for bringing it to your table. But as I stated, that's not all. So there are other books as well, one of which is entitled Extreme Survival. Then we have Waterfalls of the States. Then 150 South Carolina waterfalls. Then next we have the Southern Sixers. Finally, the 7 Wonders of the World. Now, 7 Wonders of the World is still in creation, so it's not available for purchase yet. All of the other ones are. But make sure you are checking into his Amazon Barnes & Noble pages frequently to pick up that book the moment it becomes available. A wonderful read for yourself but a fantastic gift for you to get for someone else. You surely will not be disappointed. Ron, I usually like to close out with really paying it forward in a sense where I ask my authors for advice for other writers out there listening in. In this instance, Ron, I actually want to shift that a little bit. I want to change that a little bit. Now, I still want your words of advice and your words of wisdom, but because you come from a background of adventuring and in a background of climbing, you've comprised this book filled with adventurers. For anybody out there listening in that is also a bit of an adrenaline junkie, a bit of an adventurer at heart, and they're planning their next trip, be it a climb, be it kayaking, whatever the case may be, they're wanting to embark upon their own adventure. Ron, from your perspective and your point of view, what are some words of wisdom that you can relay to our listening audience, anybody out there that is planning their own trip and their own adventure, of really maybe safety guidelines to adhere to and things to look out for? Now, of course, I'm sure it's a case-by-case basis depending on the adventure, but what are some words of caution or words of wisdom that you'd be able to relay?
Well, first of all, do your homework. And with the internet, you have lots of resources. There's possibility of getting lost, of drowning, of falling, of all kinds of things on these kinds of journeys. And that happens to many. So don't take it lightly, and pray. But don't let the obstacles stop you from going. It's very much worth the troubles just to see the creation and in all its glory.
There you have it. There you have it, guys. Fantastic words of wisdom there. I mean, really, this could be applied to anything in life, but especially any adventure that you're planning on embarking upon. Do your research, right? Do your homework. Make sure that you have a very specific game plan of exactly what you want to be doing and what you want to accomplish. This way, you have a roadmap that you can simply follow. And of course, there's always dangers that come across with everything, but especially with this. So make sure that you're covering all of your bases, crossing your T's, dotting your I's, as the saying goes. Ron, as we tie up here, I'm curious, man. Of course, for 3 of the books, they can only purchase directly through you. Are you on social media? How can our listening audience, as well as your readers, interact with you?
They can contact me through Facebook. My name is Ron, and Talipitri is spelled T as in Tom, A-G-L-I-A, P like in Peter, I-E-T like in Tom, R-A. If they contact me through Facebook, they can send a check to my home address, which I'll give them, and then I can send them the books.
Ron, this has truly been a pleasure, man. Guys, you know what you have to do. I'm going to say it one more time, even though I know I don't have to. Here on the line with Ron Talipitri. We finished discussing his incredible book, Great Adventurers of the 20th Century, 2nd edition. And then his other books that you can also check out, Extreme Survival, Waterfalls of the States, 150 South Carolina Waterfalls, The Southern Sixers, and then the last book, which is still in creation but will be available shortly, so check in frequently, 7 Wonders of the World. Ron, this has been incredible, man. Thank you once again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
Thank you for having me.